She thought the most shocking thing she would ever see was her boyfriend with her sister. She had no idea the real shock was still coming. The next morning, she looked up in class and saw the man who held her while she fell apart. Her professor, a former Mafia boss, and the father of the man who broke her heart. What followed was not a fantasy. It was a disaster wrapped in desire, a forbidden relationship that cost careers, reputations, safety, and almost their future.
Yields. Step into the frame with me to witness a deeply human tragedy. Isabella used to trust omens, heavy rain, bitter coffee, tiny proofs of order. But that innocence died the exact second she pushed open Adrian Vale's heavy door, finding him tangled with her sister. The Milan Palazzo framed this betrayal in brutal light, ancient wealth, vaulted ceilings. Adrian asked her to ditch the gala. She wore his favorite black dress, finally feeling beautiful. Yields. The heavy door sat slightly open. Focus on the sound first. Her sister Sophia, breathlessly chanting Adrian's name like a ruined, desperate prayer. Isabella's hand froze against the carved wood. Her body absorbed the crushing trauma long before her mind. That beautiful dress suddenly felt tragically cheap. Her heels echoed sharply against marble floors soaked in centuries of silent heartbreak. She should have retreated. Instead, she pushed inside. Adrian's bare back, Sophia's red heels. The exact red heels Isabella helped her buy last month. Expensive silver silk sheets tangled around them, the heavy letter V stamped onto the plus. Adrian? Her voice hung in the air, terrifyingly flat, no screaming, just cold shock. He jolted up. Sophia stared, yet neither even reached for the blanket. A grotesque, tragic portrait. Bella, this is not, he stammered. That sweet nickname made her stomach physically twist. Do not, she whispered, raising a trembling hand. Heels. Do not dare tell me this is not what it looks like. Sophia sat up, completely unbothered. No zero guilt. Oh, come on, Isabella. You knew this was coming. A shattered manic laugh tore from Isabella's throat. Her boyfriend and sister, star-crossed lovers. Sophia pulled the sheet up with fake modesty. Adrian and I have actual chemistry, not that polite routine you two do. Adrian flinched. Isabella dug her nails into her flesh. Let us hear it. Heels. How long? She demanded. Sophia fired back. 3 months, Adrian muttered as if the confession washed his sins away. 3 months. Watch Isabella's reality entirely collapse. 90 days ago, Heels, she took sunset photos of them in Lake Como, fully believing her sister loved her. Get out, Isabella, Sophia ordered, her tone turning to absolute ice. You are embarrassing yourself. Right then, something permanent inside Isabella snapped. Heels. Not just heartbreak, a brutal soul-deep destruction. Heels. It was the part of her that spent 23 years shrinking down. Starving for the smallest scraps of love her toxic family offered. She did not scream. She did not shatter the nearby antique vase, though the violence would have felt like justice. She simply walked away. Her heels struck the marble like a punishing metronome. The dark corridor watched her, lined with portraits of ruthless men. She turned left, fleeing the gala's noise, drifting past heavy doors. Heels. This massive estate was built to make outsiders feel completely invisible, and it worked flawlessly. Her vision blurred as hot tears finally spilled. Then a cracked door spilled warm amber light into the shadows. You and I both know the desperate need for one safe room to break down in. Isabella stumbled a halt inside. Rich mahogany, ancient books, a roaring fire where dangerous men ruined lives over thick cigars. Heels. She took 3 shaky steps before crashing into a solid wall of muscle. Massive hands caught her shoulders before she hit the hardwood. Heat burned through her thin black dress. Isabella looked up into a man carved from pure authority and quiet trauma. Heels. 50 perhaps. Silver woven through dark, swept-back hair. His features were harsh and unforgiving. His eyes were black and bitter, like cold espresso. A faint scar crossed his brow. He wore a flawless custom suit. Heels. Carrying the heavy scent of expensive smoke and dangerous secrets. Heels. I am so sorry, Isabella choked, struggling to pull away. His iron grip did not yield. I did not know anyone was here. I will go. You are bleeding, he stated, his tone dead flat. She blinked. He released one shoulder. Heels. Tapping his own temple to show her where. Her trembling fingers touched her skin, returning smeared in bright crimson. She had struck the heavy doorframe. It is nothing, she whispered. Sit, an absolute, unquestionable command. Heels. He guided her to the leather chair, vanishing and returning instantly with medical supplies. Heels. He moved with the chilling grace of someone who had treated far worse wounds in the dark. "This will sting," he murmured, dropping to one knee. She wanted to fight, but her sister had ripped the defiance out of her heels. She sat perfectly still while this terrifying stranger cleaned her cut with shocking gentleness. Notice the exhausted lines bracketing his eyes, the dark shadow across his jaw. "What is your name?" A low, weathered rumble. "Isabella," she breathed. Heels. "Isabella." He spoke it beautifully, effortlessly softening the harsh room. Heels. A faint smile touched his mouth. "Bad night?" A hollow, hysterical laugh escaped her. "You could say that." He pressed the bandage down, his hands perfectly steady. "Want to talk about it?" Not even a little. She watched his face. "What about you?" Heels. "Hiding from the party?" Something like he leaned back, studying her under the amber light. "I hate crowds. Then why throw a massive gala here?" A dangerous shadow crossed his gaze. "What makes you think this is my house?" The letter V on the sheets. Heels. "Plus you walk around like a king, observant." Heels. He stood up, gathering the supplies. "And clever, a lethal mix." "I am really not," Isabella sighed, the weight of the night finally crushing her. "If I were clever, I never would have believed Adrian Vale could love me." The older man froze. Adrian. Heels. Here is where the Greek tragedy tightens its grip. The boy who destroyed her is his own blood. "Your son, I am guessing," she whispered, shutting her eyes. "Do not worry, I am done with him." Heavy silence fell. He just stared, Heels analyzing the deep ruin painted across her face. Heels. "Watch the tension shift in this room with me." His voice dropped, heavy with a lethal protectiveness. Isabella forced a broken sob. "Found him in bed with my sister. 3 months of lying." She wiped her ruined makeup. "She even told me I was embarrassing myself." The older man's jaw locked. He set the kit down slowly, fighting a violent urge to smash it. "I need to go," Isabella murmured, swaying up. Stay," he commanded. "The gala lasts 2 hours." Heels. "You do not want to walk through that crowd right now." He crossed the dark study, pouring thick whiskey into 2 heavy glasses. "Sit, drink, leave when the audience is gone." That blunt, unfiltered kindness broke her. Heels. This intimidating stranger found her bleeding, yet offered strong liquor instead of cheap pity. Isabella collapsed back into the leather, taking the glass. The fire burned, waking her numb heart. "Thank you," she breathed. He sat, staring into his drink. Heels. "For what it is worth, my son is an absolute idiot." Heels. "Most men are." He took a slow sip, his calculating eyes fixed on her face. "But sleeping with your girlfriend's sister, that is a special kind of stupid." Isabella stared at the hardwood, the ugly insecurity bleeding out. "Maybe I was not enough." Heels. "Sophia is prettier." "Stop." The command cracked like a whip. She flinched. "Do not do that," he murmured, returning to a lethal calm. "Never shrink yourself to excuse their cruelty. Your sister is selfish. My son is weak." Heels. "Their betrayal has absolutely nothing to do with your worth." Tears flooded her eyes. Heels. "You do not even know me. I know enough." He leaned closer. "I know you walked away instead of us burning this estate down. That takes massive restraint. You chose my study over Svet screaming in the ballroom. That is real pride. And you still blame yourself, proving you have a kind soul." His dark gaze pierced right through her. "Kindness is much rarer than beauty, Isabella. Do not waste it on trash." A violent psychological shift echoed in her chest. This terrifying man looked at her like she actually mattered. Heels. "Let's start here. You and I, right in the quiet fallout of betrayal." She asked Vincenzo, he answered. She knew his Italian roots and the high society parties he threw. But when Vincenzo gave a tight smile, calling respectability a flexible word, the truth hit home. The fire cracked in the dead silence. Isabella sat stuck in that hollow calm before the real pain sets in. Then Vincenzo broke the quiet, asking to speak. She nodded. Heels. He wanted to know why she loved the guy who broke her heart. He dug into the desire, not the wound. Staring at her drink, Isabella told the bare truth. She just wanted the fantasy of being chosen by someone like Adrian. A meaningless prize. Vincenzo nodded. Most prizes are. When she asked about his past, his face shut down. He loved someone once, but she died decades ago, leaving him with nothing but a bitter, cold ghost. Heels. "We all carry ghosts," he said, with a stiff shrug. His dark eyes stopped any questions. Downstairs, the rich crowd laughed, totally blind to Isabella's heartbreak. Vincenzo suddenly told her to eat, warning that booze on an empty stomach speeds up the crash. He spoke from rough experience. Following a quick call, a servant walked in holding a silver tray. Heels. She ate the fancy food simply because his intense stare demanded it, fighting off painful flashbacks of the betrayal. When he checked on her, she thanked him for being kind to a broken stranger. He admitted he wanted to. It was a sudden, undeniable shift in tension. A heavy spark flared between them, making her heart race. Completely overwhelmed, Isabella had to look away first. Eels. She mumbled something about catching a cab, but he insisted his driver would take her home. Standing tall, he asked for her address. She named her beat-up apartment, a world away from all this high-society money. He snapped an order in rough Italian, sounding like a guy who never hears the word no. Suddenly, the room felt heavy with the raw vulnerability of shared pain. Isabella nervously smoothed her torn dress, painfully aware of looking like a total wreck. Eels. She thanked him for the drink and the honesty. His rough voice stopped her in her tracks. He promised she would survive this heartbreak, swearing it wasn't the end. When she asked how he knew, a rare smile cracked his stony face. He saw real strength in her. Those words planted a tiny bit of hope in her chest. Before she could even process it, his phone buzzed. The car was ready. They walked through the massive house in total silence. Eels. Passing open doors, she spotted the flashy party, a rich illusion that just chewed her up. Outside, Vincenzo held the door to a sleek sedan. Sinking into the leather, she froze. He used her full name, telling her to take care. She gasped, wondering how he knew, but he just shut the door. As the car pulled off, Isabella watched him fade into the shadows of the rearview mirror. Eels. Safe inside her rundown apartment, the dam finally broke. She dropped to the cold floor, sobbing, totally convinced this pain would last forever. Her phone kept lighting up with lies from her ex and her sister. Choosing peace, she blocked them both and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. By Monday morning, it wasn't healing that dragged her broken self back to the university campus. It was pure, unfiltered spite and total exhaustion. Eels. She dragged herself to a morning-lit class chum couldn't skip, hiding in the back. The contrast hurt. Happy student often living simple lives untouched by ugly family betrayal. People nearby whispered about a brilliant new professor stepping in after an emergency. Isabella tuned it all out. She just stared at her blank notebook, totally numb to the college world spinning around her. Eels. She scribbled out her ex's name until the paper actually ripped. Then the room went dead silent. Stick with me here because life loves a cruel twist. Isabella ignored them until a deep, familiar voice spoke. Her head snapped up. Vincenzo Moro stood at the podium with rolled-up sleeves. He was playing the normal professor, exactly the way a starving wolf pretends to be a stray dog. Eels. Picture this frozen moment. His eyes scanned the crowd and locked onto hers, making the air impossibly heavy. Behind his blank stare, a dangerous spark of recognition flashed. Tearing his gaze away, he introduced himself as Professor Moreau. He laid out strict rules, no lateness excuses. Scraping chalk across the board like a knife, he gave a simple ultimatum. Object? Walk out. Eels. The room held its breath. Isabella sat paralyzed as her reality cracked. The man who poured her whiskey and condemned his son was right there. Adrian's dad was a professor. Brutal irony. Shifting into character, Moreau dove straight into Petrarch. Without notes, he paced the stage like a caged animal, picking apart the classic sonnets with cold, surgical precision. Eels. He explained how Petrarch obsessed over Laura for years without ever touching her, building a legacy on the pain of the unreachable. When he asked what this says about human desire, a kid said it thrive eyes with Isabella, countering that we just fall for ghosts, ignoring ugly reality. The tension felt suffocating. Trapped there, Isabella frantically took notes, trying to ignore how he tasted the Italian words like an absolute sin. Eels. Class ended, and Isabella bolted until his voice stopped her. The huge hall was empty. Vincenzo stood by his desk, face unreadable. Hiding her panic, she stayed. Stepping down like a ghost, the silence felt deafening. He muttered that this was an unexpected twist. Isabella crossed her arms, dryly agreeing. Eels. He asked if she knew who he was beforehand. She didn't. Looking incredibly tired, he admitted knowing his son dated an Isabella, but he never caught the last name. She laughed bitterly, blaming her lack of high society status. His jaw clenched in anger, but she quickly offered to transfer. His response dropped like a heavy anchor. Do not leave. Bruised but serious, he ordered her to stay, insisting she earned her spot in that room. Eels. He swore his son's mess wouldn't touch her grades. Mentioning their family tie brought a shadow to his face. He admitted confronting Adrian, refusing to let his own blood get away with that cruelty. Stepping closer, smelling of smoke and grief, the vibe changed. They stood way too close, trapped in his dark stare. She whispered how completely wrong this was, listing his titles. He just nodded to every single damning fact. Heels. His voice dropped, knowing exactly how wrong this was. Logic just couldn't fight the pull. She asked what he meant. It was like watching someone hit a brutal emotional wall. Snapping back, he retreated into cold professionalism, declaring there'd be no favoritism or personal chats. The sudden rejection stung, but it offered a weird kind of safe distance. She quietly understood. Heels. You're dismissed. She should have walked away, burying the moment. Instead, Isabella planted her feet. Professor Moreau, thank you for saving me Saturday. It meant everything. His tough exterior cracked, showing a deep, heavy sadness. I'm glad. Heels. Isabella finally backed out, escaping the suffocating air. As weeks dragged on, she realized her professor was an academic tyrant, brilliant but brutal. He demanded absolute perfection. His classes were exhausting, his grading left scars. Heels. Yet through it all, he treated Isabella with a cold, flawless fairness. Heels. There were no secret looks, no whispers about that heavy night. She became just another face in his crowded room. That silent rejection stung, but from the margins, she watched him. The way he paced when the poetry really got to him. Heels. His painful search for the exact right word. That rare, quiet light on his face when a kid actually understood the writing. Every now and then, their eyes would lock. One split second of messy ruin before his blank mask slammed back down. Heels. But in that heartbeat, she saw the broken father who fixed her when his son destroyed her. Heels. She wanted to hate his cold distance, but the truth was obvious. He was protecting them from a scandal that would torch their lives. But you and I know logic never numbs a wounded heart. Isabella weaponized her pain, pouring it into coursework. Heels. If she couldn't have him, she'd conquer his class. Her essays got razor sharp. She lingered after lectures, pretending her hunger was purely academic. Meanwhile, Adrian kept haunting her. He cornered her twice. Heels. Desperately trying to fix the absolute wreckage he caused. Heels. Isabella shut the door on Adrian's empty apologies, deleting Sophia's texts. She was done with people treating her loyalty like dirt. Weeks later, Moreau assigned a massive paper on forbidden devotion. She buried herself in the archives, hoping old pages might heal real wounds. Midnight on a quiet Thursday, his voice broke the dead silence. They lock up in 30 minutes, Vincenzo murmured from the shadows. Heels. Isabella jumped, sending books crashing down. Just me, he whispered, kneeling to gather rolls. Gliding over your impossible assignment, she snapped, snatching a book away. It is a test. Semantics. A faint smile touched his lips. How is the struggle? Awful. I cannot tell if the author worships this romance or mocks it. Both. Vincenzo sank into the chair across from her, a dangerously reckless choice. He is doing both. That is the genius. Heels. You cannot sit here. This breaks your rules. I am just discussing literature with a student, he murmured. If you are writing a paper, that is coincidence. Total nonsense. Quiet amusement sparked in his eyes. Yet here I am. For 20 minutes, they traded ideas in the dim light, the heavy knot in her chest finally loosening. You and I know that rare feeling, right? Finding someone who actually understands the beautiful tragedy of your mind. Heels. The bell pushed them into the breathless night. Thank you, she whispered. You saved me. You would have figured it out. With far more swearing. A genuine laugh shook his chest, washing away his tired years. I hear you muttering during lectures. Your cursing is art. My grandmother taught me well. They stopped at don'ts, the campus drowning in shadows. Adrian's father should have just walked away, but he stayed. Heels. Let's watch this fragile boundary crack. She should have walked away, neither moved. Isabella, he started. Do not, she said, raising a hand. I know why we cannot, but that is not his point. Stealing her breath. I was going to say, you are incredible, he confessed. Watching your mind is my highlight. I am tired of pretending. Heels. The truth hung in the air. I know. This cannot happen. I know. They stayed frozen, the space between them humming with agonizing tension. Her heart hammered, matching the pulse in Vincenzo's neck. I should go, she breathed. Yes. You are not moving. Neither are you. Headlights suddenly shattered the moment. Vincenzo stepped back, terrified of his fading control. Good night, Isabella. Good night, Professor. She left on shaking legs. Heels. In the mirror, he watched her drive away, a shadow in the night. The cruelty of crossing the line is that only the first step hurts. After that, the sin feels like home. Isabella played the dedicated student. She ignored her racing pulse when Vincenzo's voice dropped in the empty hall, or how his eyes tracked her. They called it academic focus. They called it professional. A beautifully constructed tragedy they both pretended to believe. Heels. A brutal heat wave turned the room into a furnace for midterms. Vincenzo taught with rolled-up sleeves, his bare arms making Isabella forget Dante entirely. She stayed after class again. "You will make them think I play favorites," he murmured, staring at his desk. "Are you?" "No." His pen slashed the paper aggressively. "You just ask better questions. It is earned." Isabella perched on a desk. "I think you just like the argument." Heels. That too. He looked up, a dark spark in his eyes completely unrelated to academics. "Your midterm was flawless. Graded already? I rarely sleep." He handed it over. A perfect score. She took it, fighting a shiver as their fingers brushed. "Thanks to our totally coincidental midnight chat." Right. She read his praise, a tragic warmth filling her chest. Heels. He challenged her mind completely. "A question," Vincenzo murmured. "Your paper on desire needing distance. Do you believe it, or was it just a smart argument?" The instant shift made her pulse race. "Complicated," she whispered. "Distance creates fancy fall for an idea. Which is stronger, the idea or the reality?" "The reality, if you are brave enough." His eyes grew heavy. "And if facing it destroys everything?" They were completely done discussing poetry. Heels. Isabella knew it. Vincenzo did too. We all know that heavy electric silence edge, right? "The weight of things left unthought," she whispered. The door slammed open. A janitor walked in. They jerked apart like guilty strangers. The spell shattered. Vincenzo stood, grabbing his papers. "I have office hours," he said, his voice freezing. "Anything else, Miss Ricci?" The dismissal stung, but she understood his terror. "No, Professor." She fled before he could see her face. Heels. That weekend, Isabella sat at a cafe until someone dropped into the chair opposite her. Adrian. Vincenzo's son. "Do not listening." 5 minutes, he begged. She met his gaze. He looked completely at. "You get 2 minutes. Talk fast." "I am so sorry." He reached for her hand. She recoiled in pure disgust. "Bella, it was a horrible mistake." 3 months is not a mistake," she replied, her voice like ice. "It is a choice you made 90 separate times." Heels. "Sophia threw herself at me," Adrian pleaded. "Do not dare blame her." Her tone pure franc. "She is awful, but you are infinitely worse. She owed me 0 loyalty." "You did." Adrian's jaw locked. "You are right. I ruined everything." "But we were good." Heels. "Bella, we can be good again." "We were never good," she answered smoothly. "I just had not realized it." She shut her book with a heavy thud. "You made me feel small, like I should be grateful you chose me. I finally see the truth." An ugly, Heels, dark realization twisted Adrian's face. "This is about my father, is it not?" Heels. "I heard you are his new star student," Adrian sneered, "staying after class, asking special questions." Well, that did not take long. Isabella stood up so hard her chair shrieked against the floor. "Go to hell, Adrian. Stay away from me." Leaving her coffee, Heels, she marched out into the blinding sun. Her hands shook violently, not because of Adrian, but because his accusation hit the nerve. He saw the dangerous fire she and Vincenzo were dancing around. Heels. She knew she needed to drop the class before it ended in ruin. Yet come Monday morning, she walked in early, dropping her bag right in the front row. Heels. "Today, you and I are watching a real tragedy unfold." Vincenzo locked eyes with Isabella the second he walked in. His face betrayed a violent storm, surprise, deep pleasure, or just pure, crushing surrender. He ripped his gaze away, Heels, launching into a lecture so heavy Isabella forgot how to breathe. He tore into the fatal link between romance and insanity. "Orlando loses his mind because he cannot own Angelica," Vincenzo paced. But did he really love her, Heels, or just the thrill of the chase? He paused, studying the dead, silent room. "We mistake the hunt for the prize. We chase the forbidden, mistaking dark obsession for peace." Heels. "So love is a lie?" a student asked. "No, it is a mutation." Vincenzo locked eyes with Isabella. "Love forces you to face your darkest corners, and you never unsee those monsters." Isabella froze, crushed by his confession. When the hall cleared, she walked straight to his desk. "That was heavy," she whispered. "Poetry usually is," he replied, stacking his notes. "Need help with the reading?" She took a steadying breath. "Adrian cornered me this weekend," she said. And just like that, the fuse was lit. Heels. Vincenzo went totally rigid. "Did he hurt?" Talked. She crossed her arms. "He thinks I'm sleeping with you for grades." Vincenzo growled. "I shut him down," Isabella insisted. "But people will notice I stay late, then stop showing up." Heels. That rejection landed like a physical blow. She backed away. "Fine. I didn't mean it like that." He dragged a hand through his hair, the strict professor mask cracking. "I'm protecting you. Rumors will ruin your future. And your career?" She fired back. Eels. I have survived much worse than college rumors. Eels. His laugh echoed tight and hollow. But you haven't. You're 23. Brilliant. Your whole life is waiting. I won't let my son's bitterness, or my own, he choked on the word. Your own what? Nothing, he turned away. Leave Isabella. Eels. Only come back for class. She wanted to scream, to shake the truth out of him. Instead, she swallowed the pain and walked away. Let's pause and look at the psychology here. She lasted 4 miserable days. 4 days hiding in the back. Eels. Pretending his lectures hadn't lost their fire. 4 days lying to herself that burning this bridge was right. Eels. By day 5, her willpower shattered. A brutal storm was flooding the streets of Milan. Isabella walked into the hall, soaked to the bone. Her thin jacket clung to her skin, dark mascara running down her cheeks. Vincenzo stood by the chalkboard. He turned, Eels, his dark eyes snapping wide. You're drenched. It's raining. I noticed. He grabbed his heavy coat. Put this on. I'm fine. You are freezing. In that moment, he draped his own heavy coat over her shivering shoulders. Eels, pulling her right back into his dangerous orbit. Eels. The fabric carried his exact scent. Bitter coffee, tobacco, and a dark woodsy edge she couldn't name. Why not wait out the storm? I refuse to be late. Class doesn't start for 20 minutes. They stood frozen in the quiet room, dangerously close. Eels. The coat felt like a forbidden embrace. Rainwater dripped onto the floorboards. I can't stay away, she whispered. Vincenzo clenched his jaw. You have to. Why? Because Adrian is jealous. Because the campus will talk. She wiped her smeared makeup. Eels. I don't care. You should, he warned. This will ruin you. Anything could ruin me. At least I'm choosing this ruin. Eels. You have no idea what you're asking for. His voice turned cold and lethal. I'm no saint, Isabella. If you saw the blood on my hands, you'd run. I destroy lives. I'm not some harmless professor. I am. What? A retired mob boss, she laughed, expecting a joke. Eels. But his dead eyes froze her blood. Dear gauze, he answered, past tense. But the Mafia never buries its ghosts. A sane person runs here. Instead, a dark peace washed over her. Everything clicked. The jagged scar, Eels. The predatory grace. The massive emotional walls. Violence was his native language. Eels. Is that why you teach literature? She asked. Buying redemption? Something like that, he murmured, studying the floor. I wanted to create something pure, something without a body count attached. And then I stumbled in, crying and broken. Eels. Then you stumbled in, he agreed, his dark eyes snapping back to hers. And you've owned my thoughts every second since. That raw confession hung in the heavy air. Outside, the storm drowned the city. Inside, ordinary morals simply dissolved. Eels. I think about you too, Isabella confessed softly. Always. The fire in your lectures. The way you make me feel alive. Eels. The way you looked at me like I actually mattered. You do matter, he rasped. You mean everything. Then stop building walls. I'm trying to be a decent man here. Maybe the decent thing is letting me choose. Eels. She stepped close enough to read the heavy sorrow in his eyes. I'm an adult, Vincenzo. I understand the fatal price of this, and I'm paying it willingly. Right then, his iron discipline shattered, he surrendered. His scarred hand lifted to cradle her face. Eels. This is a terrible mistake, he breathed. The absolute worst, she whispered back. And then he kissed her. Eels. Now you and I need to step back and really look at this breaking point. This wasn't some sweet, cautious romance. It was a dam of pure psychological agony finally snapping. She gripped his shirt, pulling him in as he pinned her against the cold desk. Eels. Burying his hands in her damp hair. She tasted the dark coffee on his mouth, feeling rough stubble scrape her skin. Kissing his unfriend was just a hollow act. But this was a total inferno, the kind of fatal spark that burns your whole world to ash. Eels. Vincenzo pulled back, breathless. We can't do this in here, I know. Anyone could walk in, I know. Yet neither of them moved an inch. Eels. He rested his forehead against hers, fingers tangled in her hair. Get dinner with me, he muttered. Tonight, somewhere deep in the shadows. Yes, she breathed. We're stepping into pure madness, he warned. I don't care. He kissed her again. Eels. Softer this time, planting the seed of a beautiful tragedy deep in her chest. Suddenly, echoing voices down the hall shattered the moment. Vincenzo stepped back, smoothing his shirt as the cold professor mask snapped firmly back into place. Eels. Isabella fixed her hair, pretending her world hadn't just tilted. When the clueless students walked in, Vincenzo was back at the board, completely untouchable. Eels. Isabella sat in the front row, catching his dark gaze, equal parts raw desire and absolute terror. Watching him teach felt like psychological torture. Every sentence held a secret weight. Every glance brought back his taste. When he tested her on the reading, heels, she could barely string a sentence together. Once the hall emptied, he jotted an address and slid it across the desk. 8 o'clock, don't be late. Never, she promised. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Wear something nice, but keep it quiet. Heels, we're hiding. You ask a lot for a man making a fatal leap, she joked. I'm a complicated sinner, he fired back. Heels. Isabella laughed softly, taking the paper. Their fingers brushed. The spark felt like a physical burn. I'll see you tonight, Professor. Vincenzo, he corrected. Once we leave this building, I'm just Vincenzo. Heels. His gravelly voice sent shivers down her spine. See you tonight, Vincenzo. Back at her dorm, sheer panic set in. She stared at her closet for 20 minutes, terrified of making the wrong choice, before grabbing a hauntingly simple black dress. Heels. She did her makeup, styled her hair, and shoved down the screaming truth. She was going out with her ex's father, a man who literally had bodies buried in the dirt. Heels. She should have canceled, sent a fake text, and buried the afternoon. But human nature craves its own destruction. She grabbed her heels and took a cab to a hidden tavern on the city's edge, a dark sanctuary for people keeping dangerous secrets. Heels. Vincenzo stood under a street lamp. Seeing him in a tailored midnight suit stole her breath. You're early, he murmured. So are you. I hated you waiting out here. He offered his arm. Shall we? Inside, the staff treated him like royalty. Heels. Guiding them to a secluded booth safely hidden from normal society. Heels. A candle flickered between them. Dark wine appeared without anyone speaking. Do you come here often? She asked. Only when I need to completely vanish, he answered, pouring her a glass. The college crowd doesn't know this spot. We're safe. Heels. That word carried massive psychological weight. They felt more like fugitives than a new couple, but really, they were on the run. Two outcasts playing a dangerous game. Tell me who you were before the university, she pressed. Whatever you'll share. Heels. Vincenzo took a slow sip. I grew up in Sicily. My father ran underground operations. I was groomed for his throne. And you took it? For a very long time, yes. Heels. So what do you and I take away from all this? His deep voice went dead. I was an excellent monster, far too good at it. Then I met someone who made me want to be better. Your wife, she guessed. Elena, he confirmed, a deeply idealistic lawyer. Heels. She honestly believed my soul was worth saving. His knuckles turned white against his glass. She was killed 12 years ago. Sabotage breaks. A hit meant for me. Isabella stopped breathing. I'm so sorry. I abandoned the family after that, he muttered. Heels. Funny how I teach literary violence when my own hands are covered in it. Do you regret your past? Every single day. Heels. But the blood never washes off. I can only try to change. He stared at her. That's why this terrifies me. I refuse to be the tragedy you regret. You're no mistake, she whispered. You can't know that yet. Maybe not. Isabella reached out. Heels. Pressing her palm over his. But I want to find out. He turned his hand, lacing his scarred fingers through hers. The connection anchored them like gravity. Dinner arrived, but Isabella barely tasted it, mesmerized by his thumb tracing her skin. Heels. They spent the hour dodging their dark reality, talking only of old books, distant travels, and innocent memories. Heels. Let us watch this scene unfold, shall we? The quiet always precedes a total, tragic collapse. Under warm restaurant lights, Vincenzo smiled, sharing stories of cooking with his grandmother. Isabella confessed she could not even boil pasta. Tragic. Heels, he teased softly. I will have to teach you. A threat or a promise, both. Watch how their body language softens. The comfort blooming between them was terrifying, as if their doomed souls had tangled in a previous life. Over tiramisu, Heels. Isabella felt a reckless, blinding happiness. What is on your mind? He asked gently. Just that this is the greatest date of my life. The bar must be low, he chuckled, shadows catching his jaw. You would be shocked, she smiled. Heels, the bitter espresso lingering on her tongue. Adrian bought me the world, but it never felt like this. Heels. Like he actually wanted to know me instead of impress me. The man is a fool. You have mentioned that. Vincenzo's expression hardened into cold, absolute stone. If we cross this line, it gets ugly fast. People will whisper. Heels. The university will tear us apart. My son will make your life an absolute nightmare. I know, and it might fail. We might burn everything down. I know that too. The silver fork clinked heavily against her plate. Heels. But I am done shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. If this is a mistake, it is mine. The camera lingers on Vincenzo. He just stared in silence, his dark eyes stripping away every fragile psychological defense she had left in this tragedy. Heels. He stood frozen, his eyes weighing every hidden emotional scar she carried. You are truly remarkable, he whispered into the low light. You know that? You have mentioned that too. It bears repeating. They stepped out into the midnight shadows, heels, the freezing air tasting like an incoming tragic storm. Waiting for his driver, the heavy silence wrapped around them like a temporary fragile shield. I should get you home, he murmured. I know. Yet when the headlights pierced the dark, heels, neither moved a single inch. Vincenzo turned, his trembling hand gently pressing against her pale cheek. One rule, he commanded, his voice a low, rough vibration. On campus, I am your professor, cold, distant. I refuse to ruin your future. Agreed? Heels. But out here, he leaned close, his kiss slow and agonizingly deep, pulling the audience into their fatal orbit. Out here, you are mine. That raw, dark possessiveness should have terrified her. Instead, a heavy, blinding warmth flooded her chest. Heels. Yours. Good. He pulled away, his breathing harsh in the cold night. Now get in the car before I lose my mind. She slipped into the leather back seat. They sat inches apart in the moving shadows, never touching. Heels. The fatal risk of discovery hung in the thick, suffocating air between them. At her building, he escorted her to the door, a perfect, tragic, vintage cinema frame. Good night, Isabella. Good night, Vincenzo. Heels. She watched the red taillights bleed into the dark, then climbed the stairs alone. Heels. Safe behind locked doors, she pressed her back to the wood and smiled, a real, bone-aching smile. This entire affair was a reckless, inherently toxic descent, destined to end in absolute Greek tragedy. Yet she craved the very next drop of poison. Heels. For 3 agonizing weeks, they played this beautiful deception flawlessly. 3 weeks of performing as cold strangers under fluorescent lecture hall lights. 3 weeks of hiding in shadowy, rain-slicked city corners. Heels. Whispering long after the kitchens closed. 3 weeks of studying each other's broken, hidden fragments, the steam of his black coffee, her sharp morning temper, that jagged, unexplainable scar on his ribs. The exact, feels delicate way her fingers curled into her hair when lost in deep, dangerous thought. Heels. You and I know forbidden secrets never survive the glaring light of day. Isabella was terrible at masking her emotions, but sheer survival forced her into the role. On campus, she projected pure icy focus, just another student taking notes. Heels. Out in the pitch black, however, the mask dropped. She became his true equal, laughing at his cynical jokes, debating philosophy over cheap red wine, physically melting the second his hand brushed her spine. Sustaining this fractured, Heels, dual identity should have mentally destroyed her. Instead, it fed her pure electric fire. But the inevitable cracks started small. A classmate named Marco questioning her lingering footsteps after lectures. Heels. A girl noticing how Professor Moreau's rigid shoulders shifted the exact moment Isabella finally spoke. Heels. Tiny, echoing whispers that meant little alone, but painted a massive, glowing target when pieced together. Isabella desperately tried dialing back the heat. She bolted with the heavy crowd, stayed completely mute, relocated her seat to the back row. Heels. But Vincenzo's intense gaze tracked her down every single time. Those silent, loaded glances across the room carried enough visual friction to burn them both alive. The true antagonist, however, entered the frame, Luca Ferraro. Heels. A teaching assistant with slicked hair, a heavy gold watch, and suffocating arrogance bought by old family money. He had asked Isabella out twice. She gently rejected him twice, but men blinded by toxic, fragile entitlement never hear the word no. Heels. They only see a shiny new object to conquer. Heels. Tuesday afternoon, the camera corners her in the narrow corridor after Vincenzo's lecture. Always running away, Luca purred, a remarkably dead, lifeless smile on his face. Got somewhere better to be? The library. Isabella gripped her bag. Heels. Knuckles turning white. Excuse me, what is the rush? Let us grab coffee. We can discuss your paper. I am Professor Moreau's grader, you know. Could pass along some helpful tips. The slimy, Heels, psychological threat dripping from his voice made her stomach physically revolt. No thanks. Come on, one coffee. He stepped into her light, invading her space to assert sheer physical dominance. Unless you are taken. Are you seeing somebody? Heels. Isabella, that is none of your business. I will definitely take that as a yes. Heels. His eyes narrowed, razor sharp. Anybody I know, Luca? Back off. Interesting. People are starting to talk about Miss Ricci. Vincenzo's deep voice sliced the suffocating tension like a blade. He stood there, his face an unreadable stone mask. Heels, but his rigid posture radiated pure, murderous rage. Your paper, my office now. Luca backed away, a greasy smirk forming as if he had just struck gold. Of course, Professor, would not dare interrupt. Isabella trailed Vincenzo to his shadowy office. heels, her pulse hammering against her ribs. The exact second that heavy brass deadbolt clicked shut, a suffocating, terrifying silence fell over them. "What did he say?" Vincenzo demanded, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly whisper. "Heels. Nothing. He was just being pushy about grabbing coffee. He has been watching you. Watching us." Vincenzo paced toward the dark window, turning his broad back to the camera to hide his rising panic. "I see him during lectures." Heels. "The way his hungry gaze constantly tracks you." "So what? Let him stare. You do not get it." He spun around, a bleak, defeated shadow literally crossing his sharp features. "Men like Luca, they hoard personal secrets like loaded bullets in a chamber." Heels. "The moment he suspects the truth, he fires. We will just be more careful then. Careful is not enough anymore." Vincenzo gripped his dark hair, his flawless academic composure finally, tragically shattering before our eyes. Heels. "Maybe we need to end this before it utterly destroys us." Those devastating words hit her system like freezing water. Heels. "You want to walk away? I want to keep you safe. By abandoning me?" Isabella let out a harsh, fractured laugh that echoed off the bookshelves. "That is not protection, Vincenzo. That is pure cowardice. Call it what you want." His jaw locked tight. Heels. A muscle jumping beneath his skin. "I know how this institutional power ruins innocent lives. I refuse to let them break you. You do not get to make that call." She marched directly up to him, her small frame fueled by roaring, righteous anger. Heels. "I am not some fragile glass doll you have to shelter from the storm. I understood the stakes. I chose this path. You chose a romantic fantasy, not this harsh, bleeding reality. Stop translating my own thoughts for me." Heels. Her clenched fists shook wildly in the dim light. "You do not get to decide what trauma I can survive." Heels. "You do not get to flee the second this gets messy and pretend you are doing me a favor." "Isabella, please. You swore you were finished hiding in the dark. But the minute the tragic flames rise, you bolt. You run away from me." Heels. Her voice completely shattered. "If you are walking away because you do not want me anymore, fine. Say it out loud. But do not play the noble, self-sacrificing protector." The claustrophobic office went terrifyingly silent. Heels. Vincenzo stared down at her as if she had physically struck him across the face. "Do not want you," he repeated, the words barely a rasping breath. "You honestly believe that is the issue?" "I do not know. You are shutting me out." Heels. He crossed the shadow-drenched room in two massive strides, his hands grabbing her tear-stained face, kissing her with absolute, agonizing desperation. Heels. Isabella twisted her trembling fists into his shirt, kissing him back as years of repressed terror and rage finally boiled over. Watch closely as they break apart for air. Their chests heaving in the quiet room. Heels. Vincenzo rested his heavy forehead directly against hers. "I think about you every single second," he choked out, stripped of all defenses. "You are my first thought in the morning, my very last thought at night. When you sit in my lecture hall, Heels, the entire university just fades to black. So no, wanting you is not the damn problem. Then what is? I am terrified." He bled the ultimate tragic confession out into the space between them. "Terrified of how dangerously deep this obsession goes." Heels. "Terrified of the brutal social execution they will put you through. Terrified I am entirely too selfish to let you go." Heels. Isabella pulled back slightly to meet his dark, intense gaze. "You are not ruining me. You are the only person who makes me feel like I am something more than just quiet and beautiful. You are worth absolutely everything. Then trust me." Heels. She grabbed his large hand, firmly intertwining their shaking fingers. "Trust that I fully understand what is on the line. Trust that I can survive whatever brutal fallout comes." The camera holds on his face as he studies hers. Heels. Searching desperately for a single crack in her psychological armor. Finding nothing but resolve, his tortured expression finally surrendered. "You are going to completely destroy my life, Isabella." "Good, we will destroy each other." Heels. He kissed her again. Slow, heavy, weighted with tragic finality. The verdict had been delivered. Neither of these doomed lovers was running. Heels. They braced to suffer whatever ruin the world demanded. But you and I both know how these grand tragedies end. The hourglass always shatters. 2 days later, a harsh buzz broke Isabella's lunch. "Unknown caller," she answered blindly. "Isabella Ricci?" Heels. A voice sharp as winter ice cut the line. "Yes, Dean Caruso's office. Your presence is required at 3 o'clock." The earth dissolved beneath her. "Regarding what?" "The dean will explain. Administration building. Do not be late." Click. Heels. Isabella sat paralyzed in the harsh lighting, her coffee turning frigid, entirely forgetting how to breathe. Heels. Picture the framing. Late afternoon shadows. You and I know that dreadful weight when the foundation splinters. Isabella desperately painted it as a simple scholarship error. Yet, the fatal truth festered. It was Vincenzo. Summoned for 3 o'clock, she frantically texted him. His reply lit the screen. I will be there. She warned his presence screamed, guilt. He held firm, refusing to let her face the firing squad unshielded. Minutes before the hour, Isabella stood outside the heavy oak doors, masking her trembling hands. Then Vincenzo stepped from the stairwell, wearing his academic prestige like iron armor. You came, she whispered. Of course, He kept a rigid professional distance, though his eyes bled raw anxiety. Tell the truth, he murmured. Do not lie to save me, she tried to argue, but he silenced her, demanding she protect her academic survival. The heavy doors opened. Dean Caruso sat entrenched behind a mahogany desk, a cold judge awaiting the condemned. Her calculating stare dissected every detail. Miss Ricci, Professor Moreau, take a seat. Isabella obeyed, posture rigid, knuckles draining to white. No pleasantries fell from the dean. I received a formal complaint about your romance, one that irrevocably shatters our university fraternization policies. The guillotine finally dropped on their hidden world. Who filed the report? Vincenzo asked, burying sheer panic beneath a scholar's polished veneer. That remains confidential, the dean countered. But the accusations are devastating. They claim you, Professor Moreau, are romantically entangled from your lecture hall. She locked eyes with Isabella. Is this reality, Miss Ricci? Isabella felt her throat turn to ash. A lie hung there, an easy pivot to academic mentoring to dodge the college scandal. Yet Vincenzo's gaze anchored her soul. Yes, she whispered softly. It is true. The dean's stony facade did not break, though a flicker of tragic realization shadowed her eyes. And you, Professor Moreau? Yes. We started seeing each other privately 3 weeks ago. Did this spark before or after she enrolled? After, Vincenzo declared. We met socially before the semester, but the boundaries held intact until weeks later. That remains a fatal violation, the dean replied, the room's atmosphere turning colder. You understand the profound power dynamic you shattered, the ethical breach? I do, Vincenzo leaned into the harsh light. That is precisely why I walled off our affection from my classroom. Her grades reflect her sheer intellectual labor. I never granted a single drop of favoritism. That is not how the institution sees it. The dean slid a heavy file across the mahogany. I hold witness reports. Peers claim Isabella receives special treatment, always lingering after lectures. They say your entire demeanor transforms when she speaks. Because she asks brilliant questions. Vincenzo fired back, his composure cracking. Because she actively digests the texts instead of skimming summaries. If that is favoritism, then I proudly plead guilty to rewarding genuine curiosity. Professor Moreau, your emotional attachment is entirely blinding you. The dean's tone sharpened like a blade. This is why these boundaries remain sacred, We must shield students from faculty incapable of severing private desires from professional obligations. I was never pressured, Isabella interjected. Every choice was consensual. I pursued him just as fiercely. That is irrelevant. The power imbalance remains, regardless of who ignited the flame. Dean Caruso delivered the devastating final blow. Here is the verdict. Professor Moreau, you are suspended pending inquiry. Miss Ricci, you are reassigned immediately. That is a tragic injustice, Isabella pleaded. He committed no crime. He shattered academic policy. That is wrong. The dean's severe features thawed just a fraction. Miss Ricci, I know this feels cruel, but these regulations protect students, even when you believe you need no saving. I am 23. I do not need this university policing my heart. As long as you walk this campus, you do. The dean rose, slamming the gavel on their doomed fate. Expect an ethics board summons. Get your schedule outside. We are finished. They drifted into the sterile hallway in devastating silence. Isabella felt her reality fracturing, her mind spiraling. Vincenzo maintained his stoic armor, though his ticking jaw betrayed the sheer agony underneath. This is a disaster, she whispered. Yes, they will terminate you, most likely. He checked his phone. It is fine. Let's pause the frame. You and I know sacrifice is the ultimate currency of tragic love. I have savings, he assured her. This is not fine, she choked out. This university is your life, and you matter infinitely more. He met her gaze. The unmasked grief in his eyes shattering her. I meant every syllable. I'd make the exact same choice. Even knowing it leads to ruin, especially knowing. He brushed her cheek in the open corridor, their boundaries reduced to ash. Heels. Go to your new lecture. Prove you are greater than a cheap scandal. And you? I will face the firing squad. I've weathered darker storms. Vincenzo. Walk away, Isabella. Before another spectator deepens this tragedy. Heels. She wanted to rebel, to grip his coat and refuse to surrender to the fates. Instead, she nodded, walking away as the phantom weight of his gaze burned her spine. Entering that new classroom was psychological torture. Heels. The room buzzed the second she crossed the threshold. The rumor mill was a relentless machine. The girl sleeping with the professor. The biggest scandal to strike the department in years. Isabella kept a stoic front, Heels, taking furious notes to drown the whispers. Yet when Christina cornered her by the bathroom sinks, escape was impossible. Is the gossip true? Christina pried, applying her lipstick. You and Professor Moreau? Does it matter? Isabella sighed. Heels. The campus has already written the verdict. Heels. Luca Ferraro was the architect behind that complaint. Claims he was protecting the department's integrity. Christina flashed a cynical smirk. Everyone knows he's punishing you for rejecting him. Isabella clenched her hands. Heels. The blood draining from her knuckles. Luca orchestrated this? Yeah, starring as the moral crusader as if he worships academic ethics. Christina snapped her compact shut. Listen, I don't judge you. The professor is stunning. If he offered, Heels, I'd say yes. It was never a shallow game like that, Isabella murmured to the mirror. Right. Christina paused at the heavy door. Oh, Adrian is also weaponizing his grief. Telling the student body you slept with his father while you two dated. Heels, truly pathetic, right? Heels. The door shut, leaving Isabella alone with her fractured reflection. She stared at a ghost with bloodless skin and bruised eyes. Weeks ago, she was a comfortable phantom. Now she was the bleeding casualty of a vicious social spectacle. Heels. Her phone vibrated. Vincenzo. No, but I will survive. His reply was instant. Come to my apartment tonight. The address sat in a shadowed corner of Milan. The journey took 2 trains. Heels. You and I know that suffocating paranoia, every commuter looking like a juror, handing down a guilty verdict. Arriving at his industrial warehouse, her soul felt hollowed out. Heels. Vincenzo buzzed her in before she announced herself. He occupied the top floor, a moody sanctuary of exposed brick and towering libraries. The space was a psychological mirror of the man, layered, cultivated, yet surprisingly vulnerable. Heels. He waited at the threshold, his academic armor stripped away. Sleeves rolled up, the tie discarded. Hey, hey, she exhaled. Stepping into the warmth, the heavy door sealed the cruel world outside. This space is stunning. It serves its function. Heels, he replied softly. He guided her to the sofa, pouring 2 glasses of dark wine. How was the new environment? Brutal. A theater of toxic whispers and endless judgment. She downed half her glass. Christina confirmed Luca filed the report. Heels. Adrian is telling everyone they were together. Vincenzo's face hardens to pale marble, swearing he will handle him. She begs him not to, terrified it will only pour gas on the fire. He refuses to let her name be dragged through the dirt. She sighs, Heels, but insisting the rumors mean nothing. But the attack was a calculate her softly. Adrian wanted to destroy her. He is just collateral damage. Her career is dead, she cries. Then he will write his book. He catches her trembling fingers, Heels, promising the world is not ending. She leans into his chest, weeping that it feels like it. Heels. He murmurs they have survived worse. She survived betrayal, and he survived his past. They will get through this. Ace gets at him, finding fleeting sanctuary in his scent of coffee and stale smoke. Let us pause here and watch this tragic stillness unfold. Bathed in heavy, dying sunlight, they share a simple plate of pasta, desperately clinging to normal life. But as the wine runs dry, Isabella looks up, demanding the raw, bleeding truth. Heels. Watch the heavy shadow cross his face. She asks for his darkest sin. Vincenzo hesitates, the silence thickening before his academic mask entirely. He speaks of his youth in the Mafia. When a rival crossed his family, his father ordered a quiet execution. Instead, a young, prideful Vincenzo chose a public, bloody slaughter. The unseen cost was devastating. The dead man had children. His own sister called him a monster, trapping him in a brutal cycle. Heels. He admits his endless fight for a clean soul, his voice cracking as he asks if his violent past terrifies her. But Isabella sees past the killer. She focuses on the man who fiercely protects her. Slowly, she reaches up to trace his jawline. Their kiss is a total surrender, a painful crash of gratitude and buried grief. When he finally pulls away, his eyes are entirely bare. He simply asks her to stay the night. Feels. He whispers that he wants real intimacy, not just an escape. As they step into his bedroom, the cold, empty walls reflect the sheer isolation of his lonely soul. He hands her an old shirt. The simple, quiet act of brushing her teeth brings a soft human warmth to the tragedy. When she returns, a rare, tired smile breaks across his face. She slips beneath the sheets. He gently holds her waist, quietly asking for her consent. Yields. They rest in the healing dark. She whispers a quiet thank you, grateful he never ran. He swears to always fight for her. She drifts to sleep against his chest, finally safe. But the peace is a cruel lie. 4 days later, the ethics board strikes. Vincenzo faces the brutal interrogation alone, shielding her entirely. The hammer falls. Professor Vincenzo Moro is fired on the spot. Heals. The email is clinically cold. Crushed by guilt, Isabella hides in a bathroom stall, sobbing over his destroyed life. His voice on the phone is unnervingly calm. He refuses to let her carry the weight. He chose this, swearing she was worth the sacrifice. He mentions a job in Florence, desperately clinging to control. Then, the shadow in his voice deepens. There is something much darker hiding beneath this scandal. Feels. Adrian signed the complaint just to twist the knife. But the university politics are just a smokescreen. Vincenzo breathes out a ragged sigh. A ghost from his bloody past has reared DeLuca. The crime family sees Vincenzo's quiet life as a weakness. They want a soft spot to press until his spirit snaps. The sheer dread in his voice chills the blood as he drops the final devastating truth. Marco is hunting Isabella. Eels. They are stalking her to rip his heart out. She is a pawn on a deadly board. When asked how to survive this, his answer freezes the air. He will handle it the old way. Terrified, she begs him not to wake the killer. But for Vincenzo, the math is simple. Become the monster again, or watch his love die. Weeping, she pleads for the cops. Heals. Vincenzo rejects the law. Stalking is a ghost game, and the police are too slow. His dark reality bleeds through. His former family only understands the language of a loaded gun. Fleeing is useless against an empire. As her entire reality shatters under scandal and the threat of death, she throws a desperate lifeline. She tells him she loves him. The words hang in the heavy air, an absolute truth that shocks him into dead silence. Feels. When he finally speaks, the raw emotion shatters his voice. But Isabella holds her ground. She refuses to let him throw away his soul to play the tragic hero. She will not let him become a killer again just to save her breath. He warns that she cannot fathom the Mafia's cruelty, but she demands to face the fire with him. The long, agonizing standoff breaks him. He confesses his love and his paralyzing fear. Softly, she tells him to share the terror, not carry it alone. Feels. You and I have to admire the tragic beauty in this moment. He lets out a bitter, exhausted laugh, surrendering to her fierce heart. They agree to make a plan tonight. Before the Lonagos is dead, she thanks him for his highly questionable protection. A tiny flicker of light in the crushing dark. Left alone in the bathroom, Isabella absorbs the absolute chaos of her reality. A ruined career, a mafia death sentence, a raging scandal. A lesser woman would run. Heals. Instead, she walks straight to his apartment, ready for war. At 2 in the morning, a violent knock shatters the dark. She wakes, having fought for hours to keep his soul intact. Vincenzo is already moving with the terrifying silence of a seasoned predator. He checks the cameras. His eyes go utterly dead. He whispers for her to hide, dressing with the cold, mechanical grace of a born killer. Heals. He begs her to trust him before slipping out. Behind the locked door, her heart hammers against her ribs. She presses her ear to the wood, catching the low hiss of Italian. Vincenzo speaks with the razor edge of a true predator, but the intruder's voice is dripping with smooth poison. Marco. He projects his words, mocking the quiet apartment and the professor routine. The psychological knife is twisting right inside their only sanctuary. Heals. Marco strikes at the bleeding center of this tragedy. Who Vincenzo really is. He whispers that 30 years of violence cannot be erased by reading poetry. Vincenzo swears Hilda is clean, but Marco only laughs at the desperate lie. The family sees the scandal and the girl as loose ends. Love is nothing but a fatal flaw. Voice freezing over, Vincenzo promises he is handling it. Heals. Marco twists the blade, weaponizing the darkest corners of Vincenzo's history. He mocks the very idea of love, dragging his dead sister's name into the room. Vincenzo lets out a garifying snarl. Unbothered pivots to his real target. He recites Isabella's daily routine, step by step, asserting total, godlike control. Behind the wood, Her blood runs freezing cold. Vincenzo says that the lesson is over. The professor dies in that moment, leaving only the shadow of an executioner. Eels. Stick with me here, because this climax is pure tragedy. Marco casually mentions a fatal accident on her morning jog, and the room explodes, wood splinters, bodies slam into drywall. Vincenzo's voice drops into pure venom, promising to gut him slow. But even as his windpipe crushes, Marco is laughing. The devil has won the long game. He finally dragged the ruthless monster back out into the light. The brutal cycle starts all over again. Heals. He throws Marco out, screaming his Mafia days are dead. But his vow to burn the syndicate to ash, the beast is wide awake. After the door violently shuts on Marco's laughter, the silence is choking. He whispers through the wood that she is safe. Stepping out, Isabella sees his fractured soul mirrored in the shattered glass of the living room. He stands panting, his knuckles dripping blood. The peaceful scholar is gone. The violent man has relapsed. Feels. The gentle disguise has cracked wide open. He softly apologizes for the chaos. But Isabella just walks through the wreckage, gently taking his bleeding hands. Slumping on the ruined sofa, he confesses the terrible truth. The Mafia is hunting her. Aid kit, kneeling to clean his wounds. The cinematic contrast, a quiet, tender act of devotion echoing right over a promise of mass murder. She wipes away the fresh blood of his tragic past. Feels. Isabella knew this violent cycle and begged him to stop. Vincenzo argued brutality was the only language the Mafia understood. Teach them a new one. She just wanted proof his mob days were over. But asking organized crime to politely walk away? Pure fantasy. She knew playing the monster again would destroy his soul. Holding his face, she pleaded with him to stay the quiet poetry professor. She wanted the academic, not the assassin. Feels. Guilt hit him hard. He admitted the killer was still alive inside him. But Isabella only saw a fierce protector. He closed his eyes, soaking in her warmth, caught in the trap of saving her without losing his soul. She kissed him, promising they would outsmart the mob together. They stayed up all night planning. Vincenzo still held underworld leverage, old debts to make the Rossini family back off. It meant stepping into the dark, but it beat an open street war. Feels. Think about the heavy choices they're making. By sunrise, they had a shaky plan. Vincenzo would cash in old political favors to buy time. If that fell through, they had to run. When Isabella asked if he could really walk away from his past, he just held her. To him, her life was everything. She hoped love could erase his bloody history. But the cold truth of his bruised knuckles and the mob's deadly threats rang like an alarm in her head. Feels. Refusing to let fear win, she went to class. She took notes in a daze, missing how simple her life used to be. Out in the hall, Christina pointed out how tired she looked. Isabella got defensive. Christina admitted she was sick of campus gossip, especially Luke bragging about ruining Professor Moreau's career. It's completely wild. This petty college drama was happening exactly while Isabella fought to survive a deadly game with the Italian mob. Heels. Smiling sweetly, Christina dropped a bomb. She had reported Luca's shady deals to the department head. Even with her stomach in knots, Isabella laughed and called it wicked. Christina just shrugged, calling it smart. Then the mood shifted.
Was Vincenzo really worth all this chaos?
Isabella thought about his gentle hands and how he would burn the city down to keep her safe. Right then, she knew. He was worth every single risk. Heels. Right then, she stopped caring what anyone thought. Christina's bold attitude gave Isabella a much-needed anchor, completely oblivious to the real danger. She chose Vincenzo, standing by him despite the looming Mafia threat. Then, her phone buzzed, shattering the moment. A text from an unknown number. Her stomach dropped as the image loaded. A grainy, distant photo of her on her morning run, a predator watching its prey. Heels. The timestamp showed it was taken today, paired with a joke about watching her step. Isabella froze in the busy hallway, hands shaking. Christina saw the creepy photo and gasped. But Isabella knew the truth. The police couldn't do anything about a public picture. This was a classic Mafia scare tactic. She deleted the text and blocked the number, fully aware she was just putting a band-aid on a bullet hole. Heels. She rushed outside and called Vincenzo. He answered instantly. She panicked as she described the photo. His reaction was a terrifying dead calm. He told her to stay in plain sight until his driver arrived. He didn't tell her to relax. He said fear keeps you alive. Promising his love, he hung up. She waited 20 agonizing minutes until a black sedan finally pulled up. Heels. The woman behind the wheel was all business. No hellos. She just popped the lock. They drove through Milan in total silence, taking crazy turns to lose any tails. Isabella's was completely lost. Finally, they pulled up to a massive glass high-rise. Heavy security walked her up to a stunning penthouse that screamed old money and fresh danger. Vincenzo was waiting. But he wasn't alone in his expensive fortress. Heels. Two men sat on the couch in sharp suits, radiating danger. Vincenzo introduced Matteo and Giovanni as ghosts from his past. Matteo stared at her with dead eyes, mocking Vincenzo for risking everything for love. Vincenzo growled a warning, but Matteo just ordered her to sit so they could keep her alive. Isabella sat stiffly, staring at real-life mobsters. Giovanni flashed a dark smile, welcoming her to Vincenzo's twisted world. Feels. Giovanni dropped the ugly truth. Loving Vincenzo meant inheriting his deadly baggage. Vincenzo silenced him, pulling Isabella close. He said these men could crush the Rossini boss. When she asked how, Matteo offered a chilling smile. The power to make a man disappear. We have to ask ourselves, is it worth it? Her romance now requires a literal deal with the devil just to survive tomorrow. Heels. It's the inescapable pull of the underworld. We know the Mafia never lets anyone just walk away. Matteo explained that Carlo kept proof of his boss's crimes. That blackmail would force them to back off. Looking at Vincenzo, Isabella felt pure dread. She asked what this would cost. Vincenzo admitted it was a future favor, the ultimate Mafia currency. She reminded him he was out. He just squeezed her hand, was walking right back into hell, trading his soul to keep her safe. Heels. He confessed her life was worth his damnation. The deal was done. She just had to trust him. Isabella felt a quiet collapse inside. She wanted to scream that this would pull him back into the violence he'd escaped. But seeing the sheer terror in his eyes, she swallowed her words and gave him her trust. Matteo adjusted his coat to leave, praising her obedience. He told Vincenzo to keep her alive, pausing at the door with a rare look of genuine pity. Heels. Matteo muttered that Elena would be proud he chose protection over revenge. When the door shut, the silence was Vincenzo, feeling the heavy weight of his guilt. In the dim light, she asked about his late wife, knowing Elena had changed him. Staring blankly, Vincenzo's voice cracked with a decade of trauma. He said Elena was absolutely fearless. They met when she was a prosecutor, actively trying to lock up his crime family. Heels. Smiling sadly, he explained how he tried to scare her off the case. She just laughed and demanded dinner first. Over the meal, she listed every horrible thing he'd done. Every broken family, every buried body, his fists clenched at the memory. She challenged him, saying he could be a good man if he was just brave enough to try. Vincenzo admitted he was still neck-deep in mob business when they married, but Elena never stopped believing he could change. Telling the story, he finally broke down in tears. Heels. Then tragedy hit. The mob murdered Elena to punish him. She was his only weakness. Isabella fought tears as Vincenzo explained the dark irony. He had immense Mafia pride to kill the woman, but couldn't he loved. And again. When Isabella said she wasn't Elena, he agreed. Elena wanted to fix his soul. Isabella loved the ruins. Holding her face, he promised to keep her alive, completely indifferent to the moral cost or who had to bleed for it. Heels. She asked if he accepted his own destruction. He said it was the only way. Their kiss tasted of heartbreak and desperate love. Foreheads resting together, she promised they'd survive. But Vincenzo made her swear one thing. If the mob came and he wasn't there, she had to run. Isabella desperately wanted to fight beside him. But seeing a broken man terrified of repeating his greatest tragedy, she let her defiance go. She swore to run. Heels. Let us frame the shot, you and I. The next few days fade into a heavy, suffocating mist. Vincenzo posts guards at Isabella's door. The physical danger evaporates, but the mental dread remains, a quiet horror, like standing barefoot on cracking ice. Heels. Across the university, their forbidden romance cools into cheap gossip. Isabella fades from a glaring headline into yesterday's forgotten campus scandal. To be erased so easily carries a quiet, aching tragedy. Heels. It holds until Adrian finally corners her near the library, his face totally ruined by desperate, agonizing regret. Heels. Watch this brutal exchange closely. He grabs her arm, publicly begging. Let, she says, her tone colder than winter wind. Adrian looks completely shattered. I am sorry for everything. For being a jealous fool. Apology noted. Let go. Heels. Are you actually with my father? Adrian's voice breaks, mourning the very wreckage he created. I need to know what I lost. Isabella rips her arm away, chest heaving. You did not lose me. You threw me away. I made mistakes. You made choices. Yes, feels. I am with him. Not for cheap revenge, but because he sees my soul, he respects my mind, he makes me feel alive. Feels. I hope you find love someday, Adrian, but it was never me. She turns her back, leaving him standing in the freezing shadows. Notice how the scene shifts here. That evening, Vincenzo calls with heavy news. The hitman is gone. The Mafia family pulled back. Feels. It is over, Vincenzo exhales, a crushing weight leaving his broad shoulders. You are safe, but Isabella feels no comfort. She only pictures the dark debt he now owes the underworld. Vincenzo had cracked the door to his violent past, Feels, leaving just enough room for old ghosts to creep quietly back inside. Feels. What happens now? She whispers, trembling. Now we live, we build a life. And when the mob collects that favor, he knocks. 2 days fade out before she finds Vincenzo drowning in scattered documents. For the first time, a flicker of real hope brightens his weathered face. What is all this? She asks, stepping into the warm lamplight. Job offers. 3 different colleges want me. He points at the cluttered desk. Florence, Rome, Verona, far from the bitter scandals of Milan. Feels. That is incredible. There is more, he murmurs softly, voice thick. A publisher wants me to write about justice in classic poetry. My dark past me the perfect candidate. Isabella lets out a weak, broken laugh. Your life as an ex-mobster? Exactly. Feels. He closes the distance, his massive frame suddenly so gentle in the dim room. We have a real future. She tests the word carefully. We? More sure than I have ever been. He grips her trembling hands. I know this love story is messy. Feels. But I want to build my whole world around you. Feels. Even if it means leaving Milan behind? Especially then. This city is full of our ghosts. He pulls her tight against his chest, shielding her. Come with me. We begin again. You can switch schools, graduate where no one knows your name. Feels. That is running away, she whispers against his shirt. No. It is walking forward, he pleads, his deep voice thick with raw emotion. Isabella searches his dark eyes, weighing the massive choice. To leave the ugly drama. To stop loving him in secret. Feels. And step into the sunlight with this scarred, broken man. Feels. Okay, she finally breathes out. Let us start over. He kisses her with an agonizing, desperate hunger, and a deep peace washes over her spirit. The tragedy seems to fade. Cut to Florence in September. Feels, dripping with golden sunlight. The kind of aching beauty that inspires sad poetry. They rent a quiet apartment by the Arno River, hidden from the loud world. Vincenzo steps into his new teaching job, giving lectures on classic books. Feels. Isabella shifts her degree, starting fresh as a college student in a totally different part of the campus. Feels. No crossed paths, no dirty rumors. They learned that bloody lesson well. The first month feels like taking a real breath of air. Vincenzo burns dinner, too focused on reading. Isabella buries the tables in heavy textbook. Feels. They bicker over the heater and dream about getting old. It feels so beautifully normal, completely boring. Isabella loves every quiet second, but you and I know how Greek tragedies work. The past never stays in the grave. Feels. 3 months into building their safe little bubble, the criminal underworld finally knocks on their door. Feels. The Mafia never respects a locked door. It is a lazy Saturday when Vincenzo opens their apartment. Isabella is reading in bed when a strange voice cuts down the hall. Sharp, polished, the tone of pure authority. Vincenzo Moreau? She asks. Feels. I am Giulia Marchesi, a true crime reporter looking into Sicilian mob families leaving the life. I want an interview. A heavy, suffocating silence fills the room. Isabella feels her stomach drop. Pulling on Vincenzo's old shirt, feels she sneaks down the corridor. A sharp-looking woman stands there, holding a voice recorder like a loaded gun. Feels. Vincenzo blocks the doorway, his wide shoulders stiff as a brick wall. I am passing on this, he mutters, eyes dark. But Julia is not chasing cheap gossip. She wants a story of heavy redemption. She studies men who escape La Cosa Nostra to build clean lives. Feels. I spoke to Matteo Russo, she offers softly. Said you actually got out, that you teach now. Vincenzo tenses his jaw, a muscle twitching. Matteo talks too much. He respects you, she counters easily. He says you know the bloody price of change. Feels. She slides a clean business card forward. Just think about it. Vincenzo takes it, his eyes totally dead. Feels. I will not. Thanks anyway. He closes the heavy door, staring at the small card like he is holding a ghost. Isabella steps out of the shadows. Are you going to call? She whispers, gripping the wall. Never. He tosses the card onto the wood table. Feels. Digging up old graves only brings blood. But that card sits there, a heavy anchor in the room. For a week, Isabella watches a quiet war tear his soul apart. On Thursday, she catches him whispering into his phone. He hangs up fast. That was the reporter. Heals, he admits. Just to talk, no promises. Why, she asks. He stares at the Florence sunset, utterly haunted. Because maybe she is right. Heals. Maybe laying it all bare, the blood, the way out, gives some lost kid a chance to escape. Or it completely destroys you, Isabella warns, her heart racing. People will judge. They will say you never deserved a fresh start. His voice drops to a rough whisper. Heals. I probably do not. He turns away, the massive weight of his old sins bending his shoulders. But I am so tired of faking that I am just a quiet teacher with no scars. Elena always told me secrets only own you if you are terrified of them. I am done hiding. Heals. Isabella steps close, tangling her cold fingers with his warm ones. Then I am going too. He shakes his head, but she stands strong. We are in this together, even the dark parts. Heals. They meet at a quiet cafe near the college. Julia sets up her small recorder while Vincenzo grips his hot espresso, his huge hands shaking from held-back stress. Isabella sits touching his side, acting as the quiet anchor in his mental storm. Heals. Let us start at the beginning, Julia says smoothly. When did you join the life? Vincenzo lets out a long, heavy breath. 15. My dad ran a Palermo crime family. It was not a choice, it was my bloodline. And were you good? Julia asks softly. Heals. I was efficient, he answers, staring you how fear worked. By 25, I was the mob boss. His voice turns to ice, totally dead. I broke people. I ended lives. Heals. I built an empire on pure violence, leaning in. I found a woman who looked past the monster. My wife, Elena, a lawyer out of all things. She demanded I be a better man. He chokes on a hard, ugly pause. Heals. Grief flashing across his face. And then she was killed, because a rival boss wanted to break my spirit, and she was the easy target. Julia drops her gaze. I am so sorry. I was too, Vincenzo whispers. Sorry enough to burn my whole Mafia world to ash. Heals. He turns his dark eyes to Isabella. Starting fresh is not magic. It is waking up every single day and choosing not to be the bad guy. Can we really change? Julia asks the room. Heals. Or are we just actors playing parts? Change is real. Vincenzo answers, jaw set. But it is never done. I am still the guy who pulled those triggers. That blackness lives deep in my bones. If my loved ones are threatened, my first thought is always blood. Heals. Under the small table, his thick fingers lace tightly through Isabella's. But I force myself to make a different second choice that is not playing a role, that is surviving. For an hour, he strips his damaged soul bare under the cafe lights. No excuses. Heals. No romantic mafia movies. Just the raw, ugly truth of heavy guilt and the brutal fight to earn the air he breathes today. Heals. We both know what comes after a heavy confession, the painful weight. Julia packs her bags. Thank you for the raw truth, she says quietly. It is a massive story. Isabella asks when the article comes out. 2 months, Julia says, stopping at the door. Heals. For the record, I think you both are incredibly brave. Fighting for a quiet life when the odds are stacked against you. Hours later, Vincenzo and Isabella walk the Arno River in deep silence. Heals. The dying sun paints the water liquid gold while clueless tourists take photos, totally blind to the storm raging inside this broken man. Are you okay? Isabella whispers, shivering in the breeze. Vincenzo pulls her tight. Ask me in 2 months. Heals. What if this destroys everything? He whispered, his jaw tight. If the university finds out who I really am, my teaching days are over. The camera catches her stopping, forcing him to meet her eyes. Then we burned together, she answered. Heals. You made the right call. You stood your ground instead of running. Even if it ruins us, he pressed, even then, living in dread is no way to breathe. Her thumbs traced the deep lines of his weathered face. Secrets only win when you blink. Heals. He kissed her then, right on the bustling pavement, the river a blurred backdrop of motion. Deep down, Isabella finally exhaled, anchored in absolute peace. Heals. Picture the reality of raw devotion, choosing each other while the world burns around you. That November, the truth hit the newsstands in stark, unforgiving ink. A major Italian paper ran the headline, From Mafia Enforcer to Literature Professor. Heals. Vincenzo's bloody past and his desperate bid for redemption were suddenly bare under the harsh public spotlight. The fallout was absolute chaos. Half the city called him a hero, while the rest demanded the criminal's head. Heals. The university dragged him in for a tribunal. Back in their dimly lit apartment, Isabella paced, her hands trembling. They had just built a sanctuary. Would the truth reduce it all to ash? Heals. 3 agonizing hours dragged by before he pushed the door open, his face an unreadable mask. Well, she choked out. They are keeping me, he said, his heavy frame collapsing onto the couch as if gravity itself had doubled. But there are rules, feels. I have to tell my classes everything, no more shadows. One slip and I am finished. Isabella let out a breath she had been holding for hours. But you are staying. He pulled her against his chest, feels. The board realized his violent history taught lessons textbooks could never reach. He just had to let his scars show. Through glistening tears, the tragic irony hit Isabella. The truth did not break him. It saved his life. Feels. Elena was right, he whispered, his rough thumb catching a tear as it fell down her cheek. I could not have survived this in the dark. You saw through the monster I was. You decided I was worth the blood and the fight. A soft smile touched her lips, feels. You are, even with your stubborn pride and those old mob habits. He swore to do better. That night, the thick, heavy dread finally broke. Bathed in the warm glow of their kitchen, they shared wine, daring to map out a real future, feels. He imagined writing his story while she planned her Renaissance paper. Two battered survivors, desperately planting hope in the ruins of their past, feels. Hours deep into the pitch-black night, his rough voice broke the silence, Mary. The camera holds on Isabella as her breath catches. He said it again, shedding every last ghost of his Mafia guilt. No debts, no obligations, just this, feels. I want this life with you, he pressed, locking his dark eyes on hers. Because you make me want to be a good man. She let out a breathless laugh, mocking his terrible lack of poetry. Vincenzo shifted closer, accepting the challenge. Isabella Ricci, feels. You crashed into my ruined life and dragged me out of hell. You made a dead man's heart beat again, feels. You have the courage to love a shattered man, he whispered into the quiet room. I do not deserve you, but I am selfish enough to keep you. Let me spend the rest of my life becoming the man you see. Right here, feels, you and I witnessed the ultimate human anchor, the agonizing, beautiful drive to heal for someone else. Overcome with emotion, Isabella nodded, tears spilling over. That means yes, he asked. It did. They kissed, feels, a desperate exchange of salvation that washed away the ash of his brutal history. Vincenzo pulled back, a rare, blinding smile cracking through 20 years of violence. I do not have a ring, he muttered, feels. To really feel the weight of this, let us cut to a bitter, freezing January in Florence. I do not need a ring. Isabella laughed, her tears falling fast. You will when my mother finds out, Vincenzo muttered deadpan. We do not talk, feels, but the woman has eyes everywhere. We see their wedding unfold as a muted scene in a bleak city hall. Just a few trusted allies stood by. Isabella cut her toxic bloodline entirely, leaving behind a family who only loved with conditions, feels. The ceremony was brutally short and stripped bare. The magistrate's words sounded so ordinary, but they anchored the heavy, tragic souls of two bruised survivors finding their harbor, feels. When the ink dried, Vincenzo kissed her with a starving, desperate hunger, completely blind to the sterile walls around them. Cut to a dimly lit local tavern. Shadows dance across the tables as Matteo stands to raise his glass, feels. He toasts a love stubborn enough to outlive their darkest nightmares, and jokes about Vincenzo's awful cooking. But as the laughter fades, the heavy grief of 30 bloody years in the syndicate settles over the frame. I have seen this man do terrible, feels. Beautiful and incredibly foolish things, Matteo said, his voice thick with emotion. But choosing her, the smartest choice he has ever made. Do not ruin it. Vincenzo met his brother-in-arms stare. I will try, feels. Panning across the dark, narrow stone alleys of Florence, Isabella felt a rare, heavy stillness. A cheap metal ring did not magically cure their trauma, but standing in the cold, daring the world to challenge their deeply flawed bond, changed everything, feels. Happy? Vincenzo asked, wrapping his heavy coat around her against the freezing wind. Ridiculously, she whispered. You? More than I have any right to be, he murmured, his lips pressing into her hair. He thanked her for not running, feels. For looking at the bloody wreckage of an enforcer and seeing something worth saving. For fighting the darkness when he was paralyzed by his own guilt. Isabella beamed, tears threatening to spill. Someone had to be stubborn, feels. Walking up the shadowed stairs to their apartment, the camera follows Isabella as she reflects on their brutal journey. From that blood-drenched night in the mob boss's mansion to a reality that finally felt real. This was no Hollywood romance, feels. It was the grueling, gritty work of two broken souls building a home. That first year tested them in the fire. We see a montage of clashing tempers, explosive arguments over bills, and the haunting grip of PTSD. But they always anchored each other, feels. Sitting silently by the Arno River, they learned the tragic maps of each other's trauma. mastering the quiet, desperate art of simply surviving together, frame by frame. Feels. Spring brought a publishing contract. Picture them at midnight, bathed in the harsh blue light of their laptops, kept alive by black coffee in a profound, heavy silence. Isabella aggressively hammered out her thesis, Feels, while Vincenzo bled 30 years of sin onto the keyboard. She smoothed out his rough, violent memories. He broke down her complex literature notes. They were real partners now, laying bricks over the graveyard of their past. Then, summer hit, Feels, and the ghosts came knocking. Matteo called. No guns, he swore. He just needed Vincenzo to talk to a brilliant teenager sinking fast into the mob, a kid mistaking spilled blood and toxic pride for actual strength. Feels. Matteo begged, explaining the boy's mother was paralyzed by the fear of burying her son. Vincenzo gave in. We meet the kid, Antonio, barely 17, but carrying the dead, hollow eyes of a seasoned killer. In the background, Isabella pretends to read, Feels, her shoulders tense with dread. So you are the legend who walked out, Antonio sneered, hiding his deep terror behind arrogance. I survived, Vincenzo replied, his voice dead calm as he drank his espresso. What do you want? The boy laughed. Feels. Mocking the fairy tale of a clean mobster, claiming monsters just buy better suits. Vincenzo took the hit without flinching. You are dead on. The blood I shed is permanent, he said, his tone dropping an octave. But now I choose my battles. Feels. That is not running. That is the agonizing, brutal work of changing who you are, Vincenzo stated. Antonio spat that it just sounded like a coward's way out. Vincenzo let out a heavy breath. Maybe. Feels. Or maybe real bravery is swallowing your pride when pulling a trigger is so much easier. The camera pushes in as Vincenzo leans across the table, shifting the entire weight of the room. He demands the boy admit what the Mafia actually offers him. Feels. The teenager's tough shell-fractured. He just wanted to be feared and respected. Vincenzo tore the fantasy apart. Violence only leases power, charging interest in prison years or a cheap casket, leaving nothing but phantoms. Feels. Vincenzo slid his phone across the table, showing Isabella's face. I spent 3 decades feeding on terror. Feels. But today, Vincenzo murmured, the audio dropping to an intimate whisper, I have the pure love of a woman who looked at my blackest sins and stayed. That is worth more than wearing a blood-soaked crown. Feels. The kid rolled his eyes at trading absolute power for romance. Vincenzo's comeback cut like a knife. One soul who makes me want to breathe is worth 10,000 soldiers waiting for me to die. He pulled the phone back, Feels, leaving the choice hanging in the air. He laid out the cold, tragic math of the streets. The only retirement plans are a cell or a slab. Antonio finally stood, fading into the dark alley. Vincenzo sat alone in the frame. Feels, praying a tiny piece of hope took root in the ruins. Feels. Let us frame this shot together and ask, can blood ever truly wash clean? Fade in, 2 months later. Antonio left the Mafia to study. Not a promise, but a dawn. You did a beautiful thing, Isabella murmured. Feels, bathed in the amber evening glow. Vincenzo waved it off, his shoulders tense, truth. He drew a map out of hell for a doomed boy. Pure, breathing redemption. Over the next 12 months, Feels, Vincenzo forged his agony into a fortress, dragging lost boys from the syndicate's crushing shadows. Feels. Pan across the gritty community hall. Vincenzo sits with ex-convicts in the harsh, fluorescent light, laying his scarlet script of survival. He speaks the brutal script of survival, how the ghost of violence constantly hunts you. From the doorway as he watches his eyes catch fire, he is not just clearing karmic debts. He is drafting the very blueprint he craved when Elena first begged him to be human. Cut to 3 years later. The heavy shadows finally lift. Isabella claims her doctorate. Feels. Her study of silent souls wins top honors, securing a desk down his hallway. 2 clashing worlds, beautifully aligned. The speaker calls her name. Close up on Vincenzo. A tear cuts through his weathered face. He pictures the bleeding, Feels, trembling girl who once collapsed at his feet. Seeing her in this golden light feels like touching heaven. Cut to evening. Warm backlight. Isabella lifts her crystal glass. 3 years ago, my script felt finished. Betrayed by my lover, Feels. Thrown to the wolves, stripped bare of everything. Feels. I dragged my ruined heart to a stranger, she says, holding Vincenzo's gaze. He refused the hero role, forcing me to save myself. Dead silence in the room. Proof our darkest scenes do not define us, she toasts. To loving broken souls, finding courage in the pain. Especially then, Vincenzo murmurs, dissolved to their pitch-black bedroom. The silence hangs heavy before Isabella shatters it. I want a baby. Vincenzo goes completely rigid. A child, a real family. Feels. She pulls him into frame. The Your history. But I want this. Vincenzo's rough voice. Isabella, I am 53. So, she fires back. Her fingertips trace his jagged scars. I want to build something pure, a home choosing love every day. His eyes catch the moonlight with my whole heart. Then let us try, he exhales. Smash cut to 8 months later. The brutal pregnancy pushes her limits, leaving her completely gasping. Feels. Vincenzo anchors her, devouring books like a man fighting for his soul. Cut to December. Their daughter arrives, 7 pounds of screaming life, named Elena, honoring his savior ghost. Watch this frame closely, you and I. Can blood wash clean? Vincenzo clutching that fragile infant, sobbing, I swear I will be better, answers it all. Isabella watches the former killer hold their tomorrow. The tragic figure is finally home. Feels. The camera lingers on his gentle hands. Year 1 is a chaotic montage. Exhausted nights, the dread of keeping a newborn breathing. Yet light bleeds through, Elena laughing, Vincenzo humming Italian lullabies at 3 in the morning. Isabella returns to the university, and Vincenzo rearranges his universe. They hand their daughter back and forth like a pulsing heart. Fades in on Elena's first birthday. Feels. Let's block the scene. Matteo enters, holding an absurdly expensive box. Academics bring books, while Isabella's friends pour heavy wine for the drained parents. Tracking shot on Vincenzo cradling the child. Isabella watches him. Feels. Staggered by the blood-soaked road leading to this gentle peace. What's in your head? Matteo asks softly. Life is bizarre, she murmurs. 3 years ago, weeping over a cheating coward now. A doctorate, a baby, and a reformed mafia man. Feels. Matteo sips his drink. Miraculous is the word. You survived horrors that shatter ordinary souls. Feels. Just stubborn. Matteo watches Vincenzo wipe frosting from the girl's face. Hands forged to snap bones, now terrifyingly tender. You elevated him, made him crave grace. Isabella slowly shakes her head. He did the bleeding himself. Feels. I just held the faith. Sometimes a fractured soul only needs belief. Jump cut to year 2. Vincenzo's raw memoir drops. It explodes, dominating shelves and criminology courses. The lighting is stark during his interviews. He gives them pure, feels, unvarnished agony, the daily suffocating toll of genuine atonement. Feels. Critics rip into him, accusing the former boss of monetizing his body count. But the audience sees the truth, a gritty survival manual for the doomed. Vincenzo tunes out the static. He buries his hands in the grime of real work. Feels. His program floods into bleak state penitentiaries, using classic literature to break down violent rage. Antonio, the kid from Act 1, returns to drag more boys from the gutter. Through Isabella's eyes, her husband is a towering force of light. Feels. No camera tricks here. He bleeds for his penance every morning. Studying his quiet strength, her chest aches with an unpurchasable pride. Feels. Fast forward 5 years. The family steps into the Grand Milan Palazzo, the origin of the nightmare. Now tourists photograph the architecture. They walk the very marble where Isabella once fled in terror, where he bathed her wounds under low lamplight. Feels. This is where our story started, Vincenzo whispers to the oblivious child. The walls look so much smaller, Isabella breathes, less suffocating. You outgrew the terror, he answers smoothly. Feels. They arrive at the old syndicate study, now a silent reading room. The camera stops as they freeze in the heavy oak doorway. Feels. The phantom of that night crashes into her. She pictures her blood on the threshold, his giant hands anchoring her collapsing body. Do you regret it? She asks, voice tight. What we sacrificed? Never. He pulls her against his chest. Feels. Their daughter squirming. I would swallow every bullet, every headline again. It bought me you. Bought us this. Even your empire, she challenges. Especially that, he murmurs, kissing her crown. You showed me true gold. Down below, Elena wails. Feels. Completely shattering the heavy cinematic nostalgia. Feels. Cut to a cheap diner, the fragile beauty of peace. Their kid paints her face with pasta sauce. Utterly messy, human. Later, the living room is cloaked in shadow. Vincenzo breaks the quiet. I need to write our story next. Feels. How 2 ruined people pull each other from the ledge. Put our tragedy on a global stage, she breathes. I will change them, he swears, but souls lost in the dark need proof they can survive. Close up on Isabella. Feels. Suffocating under the weight of an audience dissecting their most intimate, bleeding wounds. Feels. Fine, she whispers. But I edit the ugliest cuts. Montage, 2 brutal years of Vinzane ink onto manuscript pages and prose agonizingly, exposing sins and framing her paralyzing fear. Cultural explosion. A massive cultural explosion. Not just a beacon for felons, but a mirror for anyone loving a shattered person. A visceral lifeline for the damned, proving no one is defined by their most fatal flaw. Feels. The tour is an exhausting blur. Isabella sits beside him under glaring lights, narrating what it means to love a man with red on his ledger. She delivers the script straight, the paralyzing fear the night she nearly vanished. Feels. Yet she paints the fierce romance of their survival. Following a Rome panel, a weeping girl approaches. My man is leaving the gang, she shakes. You give me hope. Isabella grips the girl's hands. Hope is nice, but keep your eyes open. Feels. Atonement is a daily crucifixion. He must bleed, not just promise. Do not burn yourself to keep his ghost warm. You and I are the audience here. The takeaway? Redemption is no fairy tale. It is an agonizing choice made every morning. Feels. How do I spot the difference? The girl whispers. If his love straightens your spine, it is partnership, Isabella commands. But shrinking for his demons? That is tragedy. Demand the proof. The girl retreats. Vincenzo steps into frame, wrapping her shoulders. Brutal truth, he rumbles. Learned in the trenches, she exhales. The script throws one last twist. Jump to Elena's 5th year. The miracle happens. A baby boy enters the shot, fiercely guarded by his sister. Fade to black. Feels. They name the boy Marco, a nod to Vincenzo's grandfather, a fisherman who took the ocean over the mob. Isabella watched Vincenzo cradle the infant. His hands were so gentle, nothing like his own father's brutal fists. At that moment, Feels, she felt the old curses break. The bloodline was clean, but fate always demands a payment. 6 months later, Matteo collapsed. A massive heart attack, over before he hit the floor. In the pouring rain at the graveyard, Vincenzo stood over the casket. Feels. The words he spoke shattered 50 hardened killers. Feels. Matteo was a dark, complicated soul. Vincenzo's voice rang out over the wet stone. He did terrible things for its system, but he handed out second chances like grace. Later, watching the fresh earth pile up, his heavy shoulders finally dropped. Feels. I'm the only one left, Isabella. The last ghost trying to stay clean. Her grip on his arm tightened. Then stay clean, prove it wasn't a waste. So they moved forward. The years faded into loud, messy family life. Little Elena hit 1st grade. Feels. Fierce and headstrong, a mirror image of her mother. Feels. So where do you and I place all this? Time moved on. Vincenzo went gray at the temples. Isabella published her big novel. They found a quiet little place out by Florence. A decade into marriage, you find them at the exact same table from their first date. Feels. Pouring the same cheap wine, though the world felt entirely new. Do you ever miss it? Isabella asked softly. The rush of the streets? Vincenzo just stared down into his glass. Sometimes. Sometimes I miss knowing exactly who I was. Feels. And exactly what I had to do. Feels. Vincenzo slowly swirled his drink. I don't miss the man I used to be, he muttered. I like who I'm becoming, a man worthy of you, and them. He pulled up a picture of Elena and Marco smeared in finger paint. Someone who builds, heals, instead of tearing things apart. Isabella's tone was steady, an anchor. You just had to see it yourself. Later, they strolled the riverbank, tracing the steps of their first night. I love you, she whispered. Not despite your dark history, feels, but because it built the man standing right here. Feels. I love you for being stubborn enough to stick around, he said, drawing her into his chest, for seeing a soul worth fighting for. They kissed out there in the cold night air. Right then, Isabella felt the sheer weight of everything they survived. Feels. The knife in the back betrayals, the constant fear, choosing to bleed for a love that wasn't perfect but was deeply real. Piecing a broken life together takes a toll. Yet years later, feels. Vincenzo stood at the doors of his new foundation, a refuge for kids running from the mob. Feels. The center offered a bed, some counseling, and an actual way out. Vincenzo bled his own past into those group sessions, while Isabella showed these battered kids how to put their nightmares on a page. At the opening gala, Antonio grabbed the mic. He once told me, Antonio's voice echoed through the hall, that true courage is choosing peace when violence is easy. Seeing him build this place, watching him drag kids like me out of the dirt, that is the most powerful thing I have ever seen. Feels. Vincenzo waited in the shadows at the back, crying quietly with little Marco on his hip. In the dim light, Isabella grabbed his hand and held tight. You built this, she whispered. You took all that brutal trauma and made it mean something. The refuge actually worked. Hardened kids put the pieces together and found real work. Sure, they couldn't save everyone. The concrete always claims a few, but enough of those boys broke the chain, proving that starting over isn't just a fairy tale. Feels. Fast forward 15 years. They stood out in their backyard to say those vows all over again. Just family, a few good friends, and the wind in the leaves. The promises they made were unpolished and real. No fake happily ever afters. Just a vow to mess up and keep trying. Vincenzo choked out, fighting tears, to love you fiercely, without a single regret. Isabella held his gaze. And I promise to keep pushing you, to build a life that earns the scars we carry. Heals. They kissed as their kids clapped and cheered. Right then, a profound silence settled inside Isabella's chest. She finally understood that broken people can heal into something breathtaking. The years melted away. Elena went off to study social work, heals, while Marco basically lived on the soccer pitch. Now and then, they'd walk the halls of that old museum where the nightmare started. If you could do it over, Isabella would ask, heals, knowing all the blood and the tears, would you still patch me up and promise I'd survive? Heals. He'd pull her tight and whisper, every single time, in any lifetime I choose you. You and I both know the heavy truth they carried out of the dark. Flawless. It's about finding that one person worth bleeding for, and waking up to fight for them every single morning. Their life together wasn't some neat little movie ending. It was ugly at times, built entirely on the ashes of their pasts. But it belonged to them, and it was everything.